Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome along to our compliance and risk management program, which we're going to be running each week on Tuesday to Wednesday afternoon. We've got very busy people coming into this program to introduce themselves and what they do each week. And primarily, Jason Fullerton and myself, Mike Evans, are going to be running the program, telling you all about news that's happening in compliance and risk management around Australia. We're going to be interviewing some people who are involved in that sort of thing, and they're going to tell us what they do. Now, a lot of people contact me and they say, look, I want to get into risk management, but it's all about banking and I'm not interested in finance and I'm not an accountant and numbers aren't really my thing. All the jobs seem to be risk management. Well, we're going to disprove that little rumour for you. We're going to show you a multiple range of beginner, intermediary and top level security risk management job opportunities as we go through this program. Some 16 years ago, back in 2004, Jason and I were younger and studying our hearts out at this time of year to graduate with an advanced diploma of security risk management back in 2004. We were 2 people out of 8 that took on that program. Day and night we worked and studied as well to try and get that qualification because we knew it wasn't going to be available anymore. So we did that. And my word, look, it's been successful for me. I'll get Jason to comment on how that achieving that qualification has been for him since 2004. But with things that I went for, such as tenders or government tenders or bidding for work, I found it to be highly successful for me. So it was something that was very rewarding. And that's what I continually find with my students. They get a certificate 3 or a certificate 4 or a diploma, and they move forward and build on that. So the context of risk management and compliance, people, what's it all about? Well, if you run a business, if you operate in government, if you get out of bed in the morning, you're taking a risk. And there's many different types of contexts for risk. There's federal government ones such as defence, health, education, transport, biosecurity, road, rail and sea transport, air, agriculture and fisheries. There's state government risk contexts such as health, education, recreation and sports. We saw grand finals on the weekend, and that involves state governments being involved in those, particularly in the COVID-19 times. But critical infrastructure, even pest control, states are responsible for that. Then you have your local governments. They are also involved in compliance of risk with local laws, critical water supply, which we all depend on for that cup of tea in the morning, for that shower in the morning or whatever. And we have events and pollution that is all controlled with compliance by local government. So it's a massively big area, that compliance that's out there, and security risk management. So the main point of our program today is introduce Jason. Jason's going to tell you about himself, what he does, what his background is, and what role he plays in compliance and security risk management throughout Australia today. Welcome along, Jason. Please tell us all about yourself.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks so much, mate. And I've got to say, I'm really thrilled to be participating in this, particularly in 2020, and that which I think the whole security risk management, compliance dynamics just significantly changed for this country over this during this pandemic period, and I'm really seeing some quite good risk management strategies being used out there. And I think you just mentioned one a moment ago on that for the successful execution of those sporting programs throughout Australia. If anyone could believe any notion that you could put 40,000 people into the same stadium and not get a community transmission when, you know, we've got community transmission taking places in cafes, childcare centres and that, where the population probably doesn't exceed 100 at any one time. It's just remarkable. And I think, you know, my whole theory and what a platform I always try to work off is the importance about risk management is to make sure that you respect the continuity of the business. There was a great respect for the continuity of support and what it was doing to the social fabric of this country during the pandemic. And it was just terrific to see it executed successfully. And I think there can be a lot learned from that, no matter where you're looking at risk going into the future. But, a little bit about my company. Well, JSF Consulting is a business discipline company. A consulting services which include security risk, business risk, compliance, investigations, work health and safety, industrial relations. I'm also putting together training curriculums in compliance and safety through my School of Compliance. I also have a role. I'm retained by a number of leading law firms to prepare expert evidence reports in security and compliance to assist the courts when they're considering matters of liability. And I'm really keen to talk to people about the things that I look for when I'm preparing those reports, whether I'm preparing reports on behalf of the plaintiffs or I'm preparing reports on the behalf of the defendants, and the common gaps that we get to see where companies are exposed by virtue of the methods of which they're managing their risk. The beginning of this year, following many years of consulting, I chose to take my company in a new direction, which enabled me to work closer with my clients and allowed me the flexibility to develop services which were both current and also relevant. Important part of the methods of which I try to consult to my clients. Obviously, COVID-19 has had a significant influence on the compliance obligations of many of my clients. I've been working really closely with them in developing compliance programs to ensure that they were, also implementing those programs and that we're going to. The thing is, the things that I've found with COVID-19, and one of the greatest risks is that there was so much additional law pressured onto risk managers, pressured onto security guards to enforce. And each time a new law is written, we're taking someone's liberties away. And with that comes a certain amount of risk. So I just wanted to make sure that the methods of which people were executing their COVID plans were done fluently and they didn't interrupt the continuity of business, but also, two, they were respectful to the people that they were dealing with. So, I see a real synergy with security and compliance, which has been evident since the pandemic hit, given the compliance sanctions introduced have had a significant impact on the liberties of everyday Australians, which has caused stress and fatigue. And that's one of the big things, because if we're going to deal with this pandemic for some months to come, then it's important to acknowledge there is a degree of fatigue out there. And people are basically getting sick to death of being told what to do. I really worry about Victoria now opening back up on Wednesday and the impact that's going to have when people finally feel this sense of freedom. Yet we all know that there are strict sanctions that businesses are now, the compliance obligations now enforced on businesses who are allowed to reopen in order to how they're going to control the spread of COVID-19 and what programs and that they need to introduce. So security and compliance, like I say, have this close synergy, which is extremely delicate about how they're executed, I think, going in the future.
It's been a difficult time for a lot of people, particularly in Victoria. But what my experience that I found in Queensland, yes, we locked ourselves away for the month or 2 months that we did, and then it was very difficult to sort of get used to being outside in crowds and not park outside the takeaway door when you wanted to take away lunch because there was no one around. Yeah. It takes. You might think that everybody's going to rush out immediately and be in big crowds, but people still are cautious. They just take a little while just to adjust to that. They did in Queensland anyway, where I live, just to adjust to that, getting back out there and getting used to sort of a normality. But yes, like you say, it is going to be with us for a while yet. And I think the people who are gym owners, schools, anywhere there's crowds, it's just going to be a little bit harder, a little bit more to get used to. But the good sign, like you said, was the two grand finals on the weekend are a sign that, okay, maybe it can be done and maybe people can protest or whatever. But yeah, it will, if people are compliant with what they're asked to do, that will assist. Now, one of the big things with security risk management if you have a really bad piece of publicity, such as a pandemic, and you're an elected government and suddenly that's lumped on you, they did exactly the right thing, all of them. They got on live streams and were on Facebook, they were on Twitter, whatever, and they were communicating. And they were telling people, you know, this is where we're at, this is the number of cases, this is our capacity in the hospitals, this is the ventilators we've got. People were informed. And that's what security, risk management and compliance is about. If you're informed, that's what will help. And as Jason said earlier, you know, when he's looking at for a plaintiff, for defendant, whatever he's looking at, he's going to be looking at a knowledge, skill, attitude, training, a gap that caused, you know, maybe the issue of an unsafe practice or someone being injured or bullied or sexually harassed, someone missed a meeting or missed their training. So that's what we're looking at in this program, and that's where we're moving forward. One of the things I was particularly interested in, Jason, that you do now that you've added to with your experience is your expert witness work. Can you give us an idea about what you do with that?
Yeah, well, expert witness work, I've been doing expert witness reports since 2004, and it takes a certain period of time to establish a reputation. But the important thing is that you act as an agent for the court. So despite the fact that someone retains you and that, you've got to be extremely cautious with the fact that they're paying the bill, and that should never, ever compromise your opinion. So I've been in a position where I've had to work on both sides. I've had to work for defendants, and I've had to work for on behalf of lawyers representing defendants, and I've also had to work on behalf of lawyers. When I say I'm working on behalf of lawyers, of course, I'm working on behalf of lawyers because they're paying the bill, but I'm certainly not working on behalf of them when I'm considering what opinion to provide. Because when you've got 100 or so reports out there in the system and that now, one thing's for sure, particularly ones that have gone before the court, obviously there's public access for those particular reports, is that you don't want to be in a position whereby one report compromises the next report. So it's quite a delicate operation. So yeah, the expert evidence, the platform of which I come from that, of course, is I had 11 years in law enforcement, where I specialised in the liquor, gaming and racing industry. So predominantly the reports that I'm preparing from a security risk perspective are dealing with licensed premises. And more broadly, there's particular ones when it comes to the work health and safety side of things, where I can provide some risk professional sort of expertise, and that they're things such as armed robberies and that type of thing. So yeah, it's quite an exciting place to work. It's certainly not mundane and that, because there are unique intricacies about every single liability report that goes before any judiciary. But yeah, I really enjoy that work, and I think the way in which people can put themselves out there as an expert in their field and that as well is to start to build a network, start to build a relationship of lawyers, and there are some other professional agencies, expert evidence agencies as well, and of course you need to write as well. So you know, thankfully, despite my education background not being, you know, that sophisticated in that, I have managed to develop the way in which I write, in which I communicate, etc. And the main thing is that I always try and provide my reports, my expert reports or my consulting reports, in something that people are able to read. There's no complex algorithm when it comes to risk management. You know what I mean? I certainly don't use that. I work off a platform of a likelihood consequence measure, and then I look at the controls, and then I look at what impact those controls will once again have a likelihood consequence measure. If you want no risk in business, don't trade. All right, that's the only thing that you can possibly do. But you know, regulation and the way in which judiciary measures and that, they understand that people will continue to get injured in the workplace. Things will continue to happen. Pandemics will occur, etc. But we all know that what's more important is about what have you done to prevent that from happening in the first place. And to me, that is the core of risk management. What have you put in place for that not to occur in the first place?
That's very important, Jason. I've been lucky enough and fortunate enough to see every security risk management, overall security risk management plan for the Olympic Games since Sydney. I've seen every single one of them. Any three of them I could fit in my suit coat pocket.
Yeah.
They are not 50-page documents that say nothing. They're 5-page documents that basically say everything. And you do not have to be verbose, and people say, oh, it's too complicated, I can't make 150-page reports. You're not making 150-page reports. You are making factual, analytical, short, brief report that people are going to use. There is no use having all the policies, processes and procedures in the world if people don't implement them. And the first thing that you and I are going to look at is, well, what was the policy, process or procedure? What was the knowledge, skill, information, training or attitude gap? And then we can go from there. And so when we write that up, you have to have that writing ability, my word, but you do not have to slave away writing a 700-page report for a client who's paying $15,000 for a security risk management plan for the local hockey grand final, which is coming up in December or something like that. But there is such an enormous range of contexts. I'll just show people a few jobs that are current at the moment, if you don't mind, Jason. We'll have a look at them. This one's right up the top. So you're going to need pretty extensive qualifications for this one, but it's a security risk management role. And it's the Director of Risk Management for the New South Wales Education Department. So you're going to be working with teachers and with children and interacting with parents, and there's a lot of emotion and everything involved with that. So that's the job that's vacant now. You can apply for it. But what do they pay? They're paying $4,000 a week or more to get the right person for that job. So that's a very, very high level one. And I'll tell you what, you'll be working for it, but it'd be such a rewarding job to do. As I said earlier, there is a lot of jobs in education, and this one's for Associate Director of Risk in the University of Sydney. Now, people say to me, because of COVID-19, there's no students coming to Australia anymore. That's all finished now. That is crap. Right? They will never stop coming to Australia, and there's a very strong reason people send their children to Australia when they hit the age of 18. Because in a lot of countries where they live, if they've got one child or two children, they're sitting in war zones or next to them. So they want their children, they've got a choice. They can either go into national service or they can go and study. And going and studying in Australia for 4 years keeps their children safe for 4 years, right? And then their children have got a right to possibly live in Australia after that. And then mum and dad can move to Australia. So it's something that's going to go on ad infinitum. We are not going to have our universities shut down with all the doom and gloom that you hear them saying out there now. And this risk role is an associate one. You're underneath the Director of Risk at the university. And yes, you will travel overseas. You will be going to campuses overseas, and you might be bringing back people who have got themselves into strife overseas. They've taken a wrong photo of the wrong facility or something like that. So that's what you'll be doing at that university. This one's a really good intermediate one with the Catholic Church education in New South Wales. So these roles, if you just get on Seek and you type in compliance and risk, that's all you have to type in. And this is what Jason and I are going to be talking about over the coming weeks. How to do it, how to get into those roles, what you need to know, what qualifications you need to have. I'll go extensively into that, but Jason provides not just risk management and compliance, but he goes in there and he looks at how can the organisation after that armed robbery rebuild now and move forward? Where those people were so badly affected. And one of the worst ones Jason has is how can he go back into that workplace where the person's committed fraud, who was the most popular person in the workplace and now is in jail, and they've got to rebuild, get motivated and refocus on running their club or something like that. And we're going to be looking at those issues, how that's done, and how you can become a person that does that, just like we learnt to 16 years ago. and it's a demand thing. When we decided to do that, I think Australia probably had a population of 18 million. It's now 25 million and growing. So risk and compliance is bigger than ever, and you will see that on SEEK. Don't think you have to write 700-page reports. Don't think you have to have it perfect at the beginning, because you start with small steps and build it up over time. So, Jason.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say, Mike, look, if I'm an applicant for one of those positions, and I'm not, by the way, I'm quite happy doing what I'm doing, but if I was an applicant for one of those positions, and that, it's no need to make your submission or the way in which you represent yourself too complex. All right. I look at those positions, and that particularly in that area of education, and I'm thinking about how am I best able to improve this business to ensure the continuity of education and the protection of people and the assets of that particular organisation when I'm looking at how I go about managing risk. And once you start fragmenting it like that and breaking it down, and that, it's quite easy then for you to be able to prepare your submission, to prepare your CV, to prepare for an interview, and that, because any conversation outside of that framework for a position in education and that, believe it or not, is just fluff to me. And look, I'm not saying that you will get the most sophisticated people interviewing you from time to time and that, but that's the sort of framework of which I try to engage with my own clients to find out, when I'm dealing with a hospitality venue and that, then I know there are certain things. I know the ecosystems of which hospitality venues work. So getting a good understanding of the ecosystem of which you are intending on to apply for a position for, or whatever it may be, is really where you should start when you start to prepare your submission. Because this is not just a CV, and that certainly your qualifications are important, particularly if you're going to be working in an area of education. Your qualifications are going to be important, but to rely simply on that, to me, just won't cut it. I think if you want to get yourself at the top of the tree, or as far as applicants go, and that, you really need to respect the ecosystems of which they work.
My word, that's great advice. And we'll have a look now at one that went horribly wrong. So the Westpac Bank got fined $1.3 billion for not looking after its money laundering system earlier this year, and that's been upheld by the federal court judge. So they're forking out $1.3 billion because they just went to sleep at the wheel over numerous transactions, of which a small amount, I think it was less than probably 100, actually involved big issues with child exploitation in Asia. But there was an enormous amount of transactions that they went to sleep at the wheel. Now, it cost the CEO his job, and it's a major embarrassment, and it's a big penalty, $1.3 billion for anybody. So that's the top end where it goes wrong. Now, this one I described last week in another program. It's total accident. Again, it's money laundering. But there was a lady who was a retail assistant. She hurt herself at work. Now, WorkSafe and the CTP liability people in your state, they all know how much people earn through massive, data over the years acquired. They know how much a retail assistant earns. And this lady had an incredibly high income. She worked in a handbag shop that sold designer label handbags. Now, there was alarm bells ringing because they think nobody who's a retail assistant earns that amount of money. So they asked her for an interview so they could get a statement off her, and she refused to see them at home, so she met them at work. And when she met them at work, she had a key, so she unlocked the door and they went in at 9:30 in the morning, that sort of thing. And they were there for an hour and a half, and she didn't lock the door. And the investigators interviewed her, took a statement from her. No customers came into that shop. Now, these handbags are $8,000, $9,000 each, all designer label. And one of the investigators said, could I just look at your storeroom just so while we're here, just so we can get that side of things out of the way? She said, fine. She showed him the storeroom. There was no backup stock in the retail shop. No customers, no backup stock. So they said, thank you very much. They went out of there, they investigated a bit further, and they realised this was a money laundering front shop. They weren't selling anything. They were banking just under 10 grand a day. And that sort of money would come from what you might have seen yesterday in the press, where the large marijuana crops were busted in mid-New South Wales, and the people they arrested there, multiple people they arrested there, where they have been remanded and they're not having their case reviewed until January. So that's pretty serious stuff. So that's where that money, that cash, they launder it through shops, restaurants, a whole range of different things. But this handbag one in particular was just an accident that they came across it just because of that one, overly large claim. But that's how they found out about anti-money laundering. We're going to go right into money laundering, which is a really tricky thing to get away with because you've got to get a large amount of cash to the bank, and that attracts a lot of interest, not just from the government, not just from the police, but other criminals too. So it's a very difficult thing to do. And we're going to talk about specific cases of that and what you might look at with the risk and compliance of that, because landlords who rent these things, they have a regulatory compliance role with that. One of the things I'm going to try and get across, and one of my instructors says in my class, and he's a financial risk person, and nobody wants to listen to that on a Friday afternoon when he does it, but to make it interesting, he talks about his role as making people eat their vegetables. So he's making people be compliant with the Financial Act or regulations. So by what he's saying, your mother used to make you eat your vegetables when you were younger. That way you complied, and that's why you grew up big and strong today. Now, none of us want to comply with tax, and none of us really want to comply with the speed limit when we're in a hurry on a Friday night. That's why we have police, and that's why we have the tax office to check those sorts of things. So, what we do in compliance and risk is make people who don't want to eat their vegetables eat their vegetables. And it's really simple. We go to them and we say, look, in a friendly manner, this is the line, straight down the middle. You're on this side of the line, and you're, basically what you've done wrong is this, that, and that. Now you've got to get back over this side of the line by doing this, that, and those. And we'll help you to do that. We'll work with you to do that. So we do that, and we help people to comply, whether it's with their tax, whether it's with their reporting or their record keeping or their self-audits, whatever it is. We're not arresting people and jailing them for non-compliance in the role we're doing here and what we're talking about here with risk management. So that's what we're going to be doing moving forward. I really thank Jason for coming in and giving up his time today.
Thanks, Mark.
It's you only get busy people in this industry, and I don't know how Jason's committed to a bit of time in the future. So if you get a busy person, you can listen to them. And Jason and I will be back next week, and we'll be talking about, I've got it here, the Security Risk Management Standard. That's an old one. That's a pretty good one. And this Security Risk Management Standard, which was just replaced 2 years ago. So we're going to be looking at those and what might be in those for you and what might be assisting you set up your compliance and your security business and help you in your workplace with that sort of thing. So that's it from Jason and I this week. We'll be back next Tuesday and we'll have a chat then. Jason, stick around. Don't go away, mate. I'll have a chat to you. And I just got to put up, I thought I had your contact details to get in touch with Jason. The number's underneath the screen, and you can also get in touch with Jason at the email address there. Now, if you miss those contacts, just hit replay on the channel that you watch it. It's on YouTube and it's here on Facebook. So just hit replay. So you can replay this as much as you want to, and we'll look forward to seeing you again next week. I'm Mike Evans from the Australian Security Academy. Thanks, Jason.
Thanks, Mike.